These hearings of the Subcommittee on Narcotics, Terrorism, and International Operations of the Foreign Relations Committee will come to order. I was informed that Senator D'Amato is on his way from the airport. He was coming down and is slightly delayed. I was trying to allow him time to be able to be here for the beginning. Let me just make a couple of brief comments by way of introduction to this week and where we are going and where we have been. 6 weeks ago, this subcommittee held the first set of hearings on international drug trafficking, and at the beginning of those hearings, I indicated the literally frightening degree to which I believed that narco trafficking and the narco dollar has permeated the everyday affairs of countries that we deal with. I also stressed at that time that, in my opinion, this was a threat that was defining itself as really more serious than many of those with which we have been preoccupied in the daily dialogue of this country these past few years. In some ways, some people may feel that we've learned and heard too much about drugs lately. But drugs are literally tearing at the fabric of American life. They are killing adult and child. They're undermining our institutions. They're filling our jails. They're depleting our national energy and our creativity. And they are costing us billions of dollars in various social costs. In recent weeks, we've come to understand even more as we've watched events unfold in Panama about the scope of the criminal enterprise. We've seen how it threatens whole countries and how it upsets the stability of an already very fragile hemisphere. These hearings continue today in an effort to further shed light on this scourge, to better understand its scope and its nature, so that we can better determine what we're going to do about it, if in fact we're really going to respond to it. So we begin today an examination that picks up where we left off. We will look at additional countries. We will also revisit Panama briefly with Jose Blandón in order to literally pick up where we left off and to review where the situation is today, as well as to touch on some matters which we were not able, because of time constraints, to go into during the last session. It seems to me that through all of the exercise of the last week and of the events of the last few weeks, it's clear that one thing leaps out at all of us, and it's a tragic recognition, and that is that despite all the rhetoric, despite a good beginning at education in this country, despite a congressional law passed last year, despite all of the talk about a war on drugs, there has not been a real war, and more pointedly, drugs have not been the priority that public officials have said they were. That will become even more clear as we examine not only what has happened in other countries, but as we examine how we ourselves have made decisions that have put us where we are. And I think that will be one of the most interesting parts of these hearings. We have a great many witnesses that we will hear from. We will hear from Jose Blandón. We will hear from former ambassador to Costa Rica, Francis McNeil. We will hear from a number of people who have been incarcerated or some who are not incarcerated, who have themselves been involved in both the narcotics trafficking as well as some of the other efforts which have resulted in the problems that I've talked about. Senator Bob Graham of Florida has a specific interest in Haiti and has asked that I postpone certain portions of Haiti until he returns from a trip to Moscow. I have agreed to do that, and we will touch on Haiti in the course of this week, but we will complete Haiti upon his return. In addition, Senator Mitch McConnell, who is the ranking member of this committee, has business in his state and is unable to be here for a good portion of it. Therefore, we have agreed to postpone a part of the reappearance of Ramon Emilian Rodriguez and others until Monday of next week. But Mr. Rodriguez will nevertheless appear this week as to certain matters that are of importance to the general inquiry. Finally, Jose Blandón is back with us, and I am delighted to welcome you back, Mr. Blandón. We are going to, for those who were not here previously, let me explain that we have simultaneous translation that has been provided us by the State Department, and we will proceed so that for those of you who are in the audience who wish to share the translation as we go along, there are headsets available to everybody, and one channel will be English to Spanish, the other is Spanish to English, simultaneous, and we will proceed through that means. Although, Mr. Blandón, you and I have conversed on many occasions in English. If you feel you would like to do so at this time, we obviously invite you to do so at any time. I would ask you if you would stand, please, so that I could re-swear you. Would you raise your right hand, please? And do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Blandón. Would you please state your full name again and identify yourself for the record?
Mi nombre es José Blandón
My name is
Castillo.
José Blandón Castillo.
The chairman is trying to get the correct channel here. Which one am I in? All right. Mr. Blandón,
Señor Blandón,
you are the same Jose Blandón who testified here before this committee about 6 weeks ago?
Correcto.
yes.
Now, Mr. Blandón, at that time you told us a considerable amount about the specifics of General Noriega's involvement in narcotics trafficking. We did not, however, discuss a great deal about the money laundering process itself, nor did we discuss some of the involvements with other countries, although we did touch on aspects of General Noriega's involvement in gun running and his links to Cuba. Today we would like to explore a number of new areas which you personally did not go into, but specifically I want to pursue them because they are important in terms of corroborating the testimony of other witnesses. Let me just interrupt my own questions here to welcome Senator D'Amato. Senator D'Amato, as I explained to you, Senator McConnell is the ranking member who is not here. Senator D'Amato is the ranking member of the Senate Drug Caucus. He has had a long participation in the investigation with respect to Panama and a long interest in this area, and I'm delighted at his help. He has been extremely helpful, both his staff and he himself, to our investigative efforts, and I'm delighted to welcome him here again for this week. Senator D'Amato, do you want to open? Let me just, would you move over and let Senator D'Amato move over? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, let me say that when 2 months ago you first held these hearings, there was a great deal of skepticism. I heard many people who approached me and even some of our colleagues with respect to what the useful purpose would be served. It's my belief, Mr. Chairman, that you have demonstrated quite clearly and convincingly the immense power and the corrupting influence of the international drug cartel. And indeed, we owe this committee and yourself personally a debt of gratitude for persisting in not just 1 or 2 days of headline grabbing, but the day in and day out work that you and your staff have continued behind the scenes in deposing the various witnesses and laying the format so that one can so clearly demonstrate what is taking place, and maybe the dawn of awakening is striking our communities and some of our leaders, I would hope, as we continue to hear of the incredible violence that breaks out in community after community throughout throughout our land. And, Mr. Chairman, let me suggest that it is directly tied to this international drug cartel. Let me also suggest to the doubting Thomases who initially, and by the way, let's put on the record, those in the defense community and establishment, those in the intelligence community and establishment, the old boy network, who were so quick to denigrate anyone who could possibly in any way cast dispersions upon maybe why they have not risen to the scene, why they had not identified the drug ring as a very serious one, why they were dealing, for example, for so many years with Noriega and others that your testimony and facts have demonstrated. And so Mr. Blandone, whose credibility has been established without doubt, was first characterized as some kind of power-seeking person who had political aspirations. We had other witnesses whose motivations were questioned. And now that in some cases Jose Blandone's prophecies as to how Noriega not only operated but would operate in the future, and it has been borne out, why those critics have seemed to somewhat quiet down and melt away. I would suggest, though, that instead of them attempting to protect turf and what their past actions were or should have been, that they would become more concerned in the business of the people, how we remedy the situations that exist. Mr. Chairman, I have a lengthier statement, but we have a lot of business at hand, and I'd ask that I be permitted to submit the statement as I've read it in its entirety, and I look forward to working with you in the days and weeks and months ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Senator D'Amato. Without objection, your full testimony will be made part of the record, and I appreciate your comments very, very much. I might add that staff here, led by Jack Blum and Kathleen Smith, have done just a superb job, totally overworked, without resources, and it's really remarkable what they've been able to put together, and I think this week will help to corroborate that. There will be some fascinating testimony and some chilling testimony, some of which will cause us, I think, to seriously reevaluate our effort and to come to a new understanding about where and how we have to make changes in order to deal with this problem. Let me also remind people, while this is not a court of law and we are not subject to rules of evidence specifically with respect to hearsay, I have endeavored in the first week of hearings to try to be stricter than one might be usually. We are not trying to paint a story that is not without at least significant circumstantial linkages where there is not direct evidence. And I think where there may be some doubts in one person's testimony, by the end of the week, where there have been several, those doubts will be minimized. Mr. Blandone, I want to remind you, as I will remind witnesses through the week, we're not looking for prearranged or any kind of specific answers. We want the truth. We want to know what's happening. We don't want things embellished. We don't want things shaded for any political side whatsoever. These hearings have been dedicated to letting the chips fall where they may, and that is precisely what we're going to do, is let the chips fall where they may. What we want are facts and what you have heard, know, and while I will accept, obviously, testimony that you have heard other people talking about and so forth, because that's the nature of a hearing. Now, Mr. Blandone, first, before we move to discussion of the Medellín Cartel influence, before we discuss the money laundering, which we want to go into with you more, before we discuss some aspects of the relationship with Fidel Castro, and finally, some of the aspects of Japan and its links to General Noriega, I would like to ask you quickly, because you are here and this is a critical moment, on your perceptions of where we are with respect to the process of Panama today and the removal of General Noriega. You and I have met, along with Senator D'Amato and others, over the course of these past weeks. You've been meeting with the administration. The opposition has been working diligently. But I'm concerned Secretary Schultz is in the Middle East. Defense Secretary Carlucci is in Morocco. The President is on the West Coast. There seems to be a dispersal of energy and of leadership, and these are critical moments. We are either on the line with respect to Panama or we are not. On the front pages of the New York Times today, as well as in recent days, we've been reading what Senator D'Amato and I asserted last week at a press conference, which is that there is a major division within this administration with respect to policy. And at the outset of our approach on General Noriega, we asserted very clearly that the past relationship of the CIA, the DIA, the Southcom, the military network to General Noriega is part of what has emboldened him, part of what has allowed him to be able to believe that he can get away with what he's been able to do. And I fear that the ambivalence we read on the front pages of our newspapers of administration policy merely reinforces in him the very perceptions which have led him to hold on in the first place. And so I'm disturbed about policy. Senator D'Amato is disturbed about policy. This may be one of the most critical moments that we've had to seize that is being lost. It took the protection of some potentially graduating doctors in the Grenada to call for action. It took a lot less than that with respect to 7.5 years of effort against Nicaragua. And I think the question has to be asked why it is when a drug baron of the importance of General Noriega, who has robbed the people of their democracy, is just sitting there snubbing his nose at the people of his country, as well as at a country which has indicted him for drug running. What is our policy? And I think that's a legitimate question. So in light of that opening statement and those fears that I express about where we are, I'd like to ask you your perceptions of where we are in Panama and what is happening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Senator D'Amato. In the first place, I would like to state that since the last time that I was here, in the hearings, not only in my country but also in other countries, important events have taken place that have confirmed the seriousness of the drug problem and of a general strategy that the Medellín Cartel and its associates have unleashed in Central America, the Caribbean, and the rest of Latin America. In particular, the Panamanian situation at present is a reflection of the extent to which the forces of the drugs and the extent to which a group of corrupt military and civilian officials and extend the fist of their power against a people. In the Republic of Panama, Mr. Chairman, the people in general repudiate the Noriega government. The Church has stated its objection to his presence in Panama. The business sectors have stated their objection to Noriega's presence in Panama. The working sectors have expressed themselves against Noriega also. A great political alliance has been forged that includes opposition parties and government parties to struggle against General Noriega. So, that the only thing that guides and maintains Noriega in power is force. But even within those armed forces, in recent weeks, there was a military uprising that clearly demonstrated that even within the defense forces, there are serious problems for Noriega. The situation of the Republic of Panama, Mr. Chairman, is extremely serious. The economic measures have obviously had their impact and have, for the first time, endangered the Noriega government. I think that it has been effective. Our country has paid a high price, but I have no doubt that it is willing to continue to pay this price. Nonetheless, there is a fundamental fact that is of concern to we Panamanians, because our people have paid a great price in terms of sacrifice. All of us have risked our well-being, our families, our children, for a struggle for democracy and peace in Panama.
Nuestro país ve con preocupación
Nonetheless, our country is
que el gobierno
concerned
de los Estados Unidos
about the
aún
fact that the United
no
States
define una
government
política
has not yet
clara,
defined a
precisa,
clear,
con
precise
respecto
policy
a cómo enfrentar
with
este
respect to
problema,
how to
que no
confront
es el
this
problema de
problem, which
Noriega
is not
versus
the
los Estados Unidos,
problem of Noriega versus the United
versus el
States, but
pueblo de
Noriega
Panamá,
versus the people
el
of Panama
cartel de Medellín
and the
versus la
cartel
sociedad
of
de los
Medellín
Estados Unidos.
against United States society.
Para nosotros entonces, la situación panameña
For us then, the Panamanian situation
en la cual
is a
la
situation
falta de decisión
in which the lack
en algunas
of
dependencias del gobierno de
decision-making
Estados Unidos
in some
puede hacer
parts
difícil,
of the U.S. government
incluso más peligrosa
may make
para los
difficult and
intereses
even
nacionales de
more
nuestro país y para los
dangerous
intereses nacionales
the
de los
national
Estados Unidos.
interests of our country and the national interests of the
Sin
United
embargo,
States.
creo que en las últimas semanas,
Nonetheless, I think that in
producto de
recent
estas audiencias
weeks,
y estas
as a result of
discusiones,
these hearings and these
se ha elevado un
discussions,
problema en el nivel de conciencia
we
de los
have
Estados Unidos y sus dirigentes
increased
políticos.
awareness in the United States and in its political leaders of a problem.
Reciente,
In the recent past,
Estados Unidos no ha estado consciente
the United States has not
del nivel
been
de peligro
aware
que significa
of the extent
la
of
estrategia que
danger
lanzó el cartel de
represented
Medellín
by the
al
strategy
inicio de los
unleashed
años
by the
80.
Medellín Cartel in the early 1980s.
Creo que ha habido
I think that
un
there
desconocimiento
has been
del real
a
peligro
lack of
que ello
knowledge
significa
of the
para
real
los Estados
danger that
Unidos.
they represent to the United States.
Y ello se evidencia hoy
And
en mi
this
país,
is apparent today in my
pero
country,
también se evidencia
but it's also
en
apparent
los grandes rasgos y ligazón
in
entre
strokes
Panamá, Noriega.
in the link between Panama,
Sandinistas,
Noriega, Cuba, the
Haití.
Sandinistas, Haiti.
Hace una semana,
A
el
week
ministro
ago,
de Justicia de Venezuela,
The Venezuelan Minister
fue
of Justice
destituido
was
por estar involucrado en drogas.
had to step down because of involvement in drugs.
Encontramos nosotros que durante el año pasado,
We
el
find that
incremento de la
last
producción de
year,
droga
the increase
fue
in
del
drug
10%.
production was 10%.
En términos generales,
In general,
casi todos los países de América
almost
Latina
all of the
se ven de
countries
una
of
u
Latin
otra
America
forma
are in one
involucrados.
way or another involved.
De manera que la lucha en Panamá
So that the struggle in
no es una
Panama
lucha solamente
is not a
del pueblo de
struggle
Panamá.
of only the Panamanian
Para
people.
mí, el pueblo panameño ha
For
tomado
me,
la
the
decisión.
Panamanian
Creo
people
que seguiremos
have
luchando.
made a decision. I
Serán
think
días-
that we will
serán días
continue
difíciles,
struggling.
pero
They
nos
will be
extraña, señor
difficult
presidente,
days,
que
but
todavía en los Estados Unidos
it is strange,
no hay
we
una
find it
política
strange that there's
definida
still not a
respecto a
defined policy with respect to Panama, Mr. Chairman.
When you say, Mr. Blandone, that there isn't a defined policy, today in the newspaper, President de Valle was quoted as saying that he thought the current sanctions were enough and that they would do the job. Do I understand that you disagree with that?
I sort of.
El problema del presidente
The
del Valle,
problem of President Del Valle
con las declaraciones que
with the statements
leí en el New York Times,
which you've
radica
read
en
in
el
the
hecho
New
de
York
que también
Times,
del Valle, por su
based on the
propia
fact that
condición
Del Valle
política que se
himself,
encuentra,
because of his present
encuentra,
situation,
aislado
because
de las
he's
discusiones
isolated
de
from the
los acontecimientos
discussions
que están ocurriendo
and the
ahora.
happenings which are taking place.
Por eso que nosotros la semana
That is
pasada
why we, last week,
estuvimos discutiendo
When you say isolated, you're referring to the fact that he is in hiding and at peril. Is that correct?
Correcto. Me refiero a
yes, that's
aislamiento
correct.
en términos de que
Isolation
no le dejan
in the
estar en
sense that
contacto
he is
con el
not
resto del
in
país,
contact with the rest of the country,
que ha suministrado a través de los diferentes
and
partidos
that through the
políticos,
various
a través de
political
la
parties,
civilista y organizaciones, el
through
respaldo
the
del
various
presidente
organizations have supported the president. In other words, he is hidden, he is in hiding, and
En razón de eso, nosotros discutimos con el
therefore
gobierno de los
we
Estados Unidos
discussed
la
with
fórmula
the
de resolver
United
ese
States the
problema.
manner of how to solve this
Durante
problem.
una semana hemos
And
estado
for a week
esperando una
we have
respuesta.
been
Todavía
awaiting
esa respuesta
a
no se produce.
reply, and this reply has not yet been received.
Let me turn, unless Senator D'Amato has any policy questions, I want to turn to the Medellín Cartel, if I can. You talked, last time we were here, you alluded, you do have a question? I don't want to change the subject if you wanted to pursue any
I'll continue.
policy questions.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think it's important that we get some kind of an understanding as to how the Panamanian Defense Forces and the people of Panama view what is taking place as a result of what might appear to be indecisive action on the part of the United States. I'd like to preface that statement in question because I'd like to get Mr. Blandone's opinion if he believes that the Panamanian people are beginning to doubt the credibility of the United States in its actions in dealing with Noriega, or our resolve. Number one, that's a question I'd like to ask. And number two, I'd like to ask Mr. Blandone if he feels that we have been sending mixed signals to the Panamanian people and to those who look to the United States for help in getting rid of Noriega.
Certainly, your last question, there is no doubt that the recent developments this past week have sent signals to General Noriega regarding the position of the United States regarding Panama. The feeling in my country regarding the United States is a feeling which is based on many years of friendship and cooperation, but our people also views with concern that the United States is abandoning it in a struggle which is not only in a Panamanian interest, because the thousands of dollars of drugs which come to the United States using the facilities which Noriega has created in Panama, these basically affect the youth of the United States. And the fight of our people is also a fight for the youth of the United States. Of course, it is true that in our country there is a concern, and this feeling can be turned against the United States. I have, Mr. Senator, here before me a note which General Noriega sent to the Embassy of Panama in Washington, in which Noriega makes a series of proposals, which I am going to read 3 or 4, so that you could have an idea of how Noriega tries to trick in the United States.
Let me just ask you, would you identify what it is you're reading from?
This is a document from the Defense Forces of Panama, the headquarters, February of this year, and it states.
And where did the document come from?
It comes from the Defense Forces of Panama and was sent to the Embassy of Panama in Washington.
So it was received by Ambassador Sosa prior to the removal of Devay, is that accurate? Thank you.
Yes, and it was sent after the time in Miami. Now, views of General Noriega regarding the laws of the United States. Noriega states, I do have evidence, proof, that politicians of the United States of America have been supporting lawyers, politicians of Panama involved in drug trafficking, and I shall demonstrate this when it is appropriate. I do have proof of the political manipulation of the government of the United States regarding drugs, regarding the laundering of money, arms traffic which go to the Latin American countries. I do have proof, Noriega says, that while the government of the United States should be concerned by the human rights in Central America, it has not protected the brothers in Guatemala from the invasion of drug traffickers in that country, in which there had never been marijuana and cocaine processing and poppy
Yo sí
plantations.
tengo las pruebas, dice
I
Noriega,
do have proof, says
de que la
Noriega,
mentirosa política
that
contra las drogas
the
del gobierno de los
lying
Estados
policy
Unidos
against
no ha
drugs of the
protegido a los
United States
hermanos
has not
hondureños
protected our
de la
Honduran
invasión
brothers
de
from the
cocaína
invasion of
que se
cocaine,
exporta desde territorio
which is
hondureño
brought from
hacia los
Honduras
Estados
to the
Unidos,
United States,
saliendo de puertos que están a
leaving
escasos
ports
kilómetros
which
de
are
las
just a
bases
few
militares
kilometers from the
norteamericanas
U.S.
acantonadas
military
en
bases,
Honduras.
which are located in Honduras.
Mr. Blandone, let me just ask you to go a little bit slower so we can all follow you more easily. Thank you.
Yo sí tengo las pruebas,
I
dice
do
Noriega,
have, Noriega says, I
política
have
del
proof
gobierno
that
de
the
los Estados
policy of the
Unidos
government of the
que
United
lanza al
States
mundo como protector de la droga,
shows itself to the world as a
abandonados
protector of
sus
drugs,
aliados
leaving
latinoamericanos.
abandoned its Latin American allies,
Y así vemos cómo Costa
and
Rica
thus we see how Costa
se ha
Rica
convertido en
has
tráfico de
been
drogas.
converted to drug trafficking.
Quisiera poner esto
I should
para
like
los récords de
to
esta audiencia.
submit
He leído
this
algunos
for
de los
the
puntos.
records. I've read some of the
Pero lo que
points,
llama la atención, senador,
but what calls
es que el general
jumps out
Noriega
is
dice
that General
tener
Noriega says that he has
pruebas
proofs,
del
evidence
involucramiento
of the
de
involvement
autoridades de
of
los Estados Unidos.
governmental authorities
de la
in the
droga en
United
Guatemala,
States, of drugs in
Honduras,
Guatemala, in
en
Honduras,
Costa Rica.
and in Costa
Pero ese
Rica.
documento
Now that
no hace
document
mención
makes no mention
del involucramiento de Noriega
of the
con Cuba.
involvement of Noriega with Cuba,
No hace mención tampoco de su
nor does it make any mention of its
involucramiento
involvement
con el cartel de Medellín.
with the Medellín Cartel.
Por mi conocimiento de Noriega, de
My
este problema,
knowledge of Noriega
Yo
and
no
this
tengo
problem,
dudas
I have no doubt
que Noriega tiene algunas
that
pruebas de
Noriega
eso,
has some proofs of that,
porque él sí sabe de ese problema de las
because he
drogas.
is well aware of this problem of the drugs.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second if I can. Ambassador Sosa is in the audience here somewhere. Am I correct, Ambassador Sosa? Is this, well, I will ascertain that later from you if I can as to this document, but I will place this in the record as exhibit. Do you have the consecutive number? This will be exhibit number 1 in the second series of hearings, and it'll be so marked, and we will proceed to verify the authenticity of this at a later date. Let me ask you a question, though.
Permítame terminar, senador. Si,
Excuse me, sir.
al presentar este documento,
In submitting this document,
lo que quiero decir
what I wish to say
es que la preocupación
is that the
que a nosotros los
concern
panameños nos asalta
which we Panamanians have
es que se trate
is that
de chantajear
they're
o de
trying to
confundir a la
trick or
opinión
to
norteamericana.
confuse U.S. public opinion.
Más adelante en la audiencia,
Later on in this
presentaré
hearing, I shall
evidencia de cómo
present
Fidel Castro
evidence as
también
how
trata de
Fidel
confundir a
Castro
la opinión
also is
norteamericana.
trying to confuse U.S. opinion.
Pero hay un hecho que en estas
But there is a
discusiones
fact
pasadas de la
in
semana
this
esta que
past
a nosotros nos ha
week's
llamado mucho la
discussions
atención,
which really jumped out
Es el
to us, and that
desconocimiento
is the lack of knowledge,
profundo
the deep lack of
en
knowledge
círculos
in
militares de los Estados Unidos,
military
y de
circles of the
inteligencia de
United
los
States
Estados
and of the
Unidos, de la
intelligence circles
realidad
of the
de la
United States
Fuerza
regarding the
Armada.
realities of the Panamanian Defense Force.
Han operado bajo el criterio
They have operated on the basis.
What do you mean by realities?
Cuando me refiero a realidades,
When I
me
refer
refiero
to
a
realities, I refer to the
relaciones
fact that the relationship
de estas agencias de los Estados Unidos con la Fuerza de Defensa han sido
this
exclusivamente
with the
con
defense
Noriega
forces have
y
been
algunos
exclusively
oficiales.
with Noriega and with certain other officials
Lo que le hace
in the
pensar-
relationship.
And what is the impact of that?
El impacto de eso es
The
que
impact of this is
se ha hecho casi
that
una verdad
there has
de que el
been
cambio de
created
Noriega
almost as a truth that the
introducirá
change of
un
Noriega
nivel de
will
incertidumbre muy
introduce
alto en
a
Panamá.
lack of
Y que
a
no hay
level of
oficiales en las
uncertainty,
fuerzas de
and that
defensa
there are
con la
no
capacidad
officials in the
de
defense
sustituir a
forces
Noriega.
in Panama to substitute
Lo cual es
for
totalmente
Noriega,
falso.
which is completely false.
Mr. Chairman.
So what you, let me just follow that. So what you are saying is that it is your perception there is a reluctance on the part of the American military to sever the tie with Noriega because they don't know what comes after? Is that the essence of what you've just said?
es una parte de los problemas.
That's a part of the problem, a very serious part.
Es un error.
Well, I want to
It is an
understand.
error.
I want to understand precisely what you've just said. Then, could you reframe what your comment to us?
Los informes
The reports
que la comunidad de inteligencia de los
which
Estados
the
Unidos
intelligence community
dispone
of the United States has
con relación a las fuerzas de
regarding
defensa de Panamá
the defense forces of Panama
son informes
are reports
muy superficiales.
which are very superficial.
Solamente concentran su atención
They concentrate their
en Noriega
attention
como
on
comandante
Noriega as
y
the
un grupo
commander
reducido de
and a
oficiales.
limited group of officials, of officers. This fact
Que
makes
cualquier agencia
that
sienta temor
any
en cuanto al
agency will
futuro de
be
la fuerza de defensa
concerned regarding the future of the defense forces because they do not know what will be the
que
leadership
sucederá al general.
which will succeed
El peligro
General
de esto, señor
Noriega. The
presidente,
danger of this, Mr. Chairman,
es que en la
is
práctica
that in practice,
más del 80% de
more
nuestros
than
militares,
80% of our military
cada uno
personnel,
individualmente, es
each
mejor
one
que Noriega.
individually, is better than Noriega
En términos profesionales
in professional terms
y en términos humanos.
and in
Este
human
reconocimiento
terms. This
ha
lack of
ignorado
this fact is
que las Fuerzas Armadas de
has
Panamá
ignored the fact that the armed forces of Panama
cuentan con oficiales con capacidad
have
de relevar a Noriega
officials who are
y garantizar el
capable
proceso
of
democrático
taking
en el país.
Noriega's
Porque
place
están
and
involucrados
guaranteeing the democratic
Porque
process because they're
además
not involved
han
with
sido
drugs.
profesionalmente
Further, they have been
preparados
professionally
para ello.
trained for such
En las
service.
conversaciones que
In the
hemos tenido la
conversations
semana
which we
pasada,
had last week,
es evidente
it is
ese
clear
desconocimiento,
this
que a mi
lack
juicio
of
constituye
understanding,
una seria falla
which I think is a very serious fault
de las agencias de los Estados Unidos.
of the agencies of the United States.
Let me ask you one other tough question, if I can. You had great access to General Noriega.
Correcto.
You read almost all the intelligence documents during the 80s.
Correcto.
And you have testified significantly here as to General Noriega's involvement in money laundering and drugs and so forth. Is there any truth to any of the allegations made by General Noriega as to information he has about U.S. complicity in or involvement in or knowledge of? Is there anything that he has that could embarrass any of those people he cited in that document?
Claro.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, now, I've never asked you that question before, have I?
Nunca.
Never.
Chairman?
Yes.
In pursuing both lines, the lines of questioning that you have brought up, I'd like to put in the form of a question and a statement. Mr. Blandone, is it your opinion that some Panamanians have a feeling that the United States, and particularly the Defense Department and the intelligence agency, have not recommended more forceful action in dealing with Noriega because they are concerned that he has information that would prove embarrassing to them and to the United States?
Bueno, el propio general Noriega
Well, General Noriega himself
se ha encargado de decir eso.
has stated that.
Usted recordará, señor senador,
You will
que
recall, Mr.
los
Senator,
abogados de Noriega
that the lawyers of Noriega, when they arrived in Miami from Panama, said that Noriega had shown to them proofs which could
y
endanger
afectar las elecciones.
and affect the elections of the United States.
Personalmente,
Personally,
creo que en el caso
I
del
believe
Departamento
that
de
in the
Defensa,
case of the
la
Defense
preocupación
Department, the
fundamental
basic concern
estriba en cuál
lies
será la
in
sucesión.
what will be the succession,
Porque la información de inteligencia,
because
como le
the
dije, con respecto
intelligence
a la fuerza de
information
defensa,
regarding the defense forces is very, as I said,
Además,
is very
Noriega
limited. In addition, Noriega
preparó informes
prepared reports
que hizo llegar a los Estados
which he
Unidos
sent to the United States
contra oficiales panameños
against Panamanian
que
officials
podrían ser sus posibles
who
sucesores,
might be possible successors of
vinculándolos
him,
a políticas
linking them to
izquierdistas,
leftist policies,
vinculándolo a
linking
posiciones
them
extremistas.
to extreme positions.
Ese es el caso
This
de
is the
oficiales
case
que hoy
of officers who today
se encuentran en las cárceles
are in
por el
jail
golpe de Estado,
because of the coup d'etat. They have been beaten because of the drug trafficking group which is in power. So here there has been a process in this case, and this seems to be also because of the discussions which we had last week, that this is the principal problem. That is why we point this out as a very serious error, as is also the error of underestimating the effort of the Medellín Cartel to subvert order in our countries and to overestimate the ideological action of communism, because what has happened in practice.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's worthy of note at this point, take this opportunity to again reinforce, I think, what Mr. Blandón has indicated as what has been over a period of time the cry of the Defense Department and others and people from the National Security Council to this senator personally. Who's going to take Noriega's place? Now that has been stated to this senator directly from rather high officials in these agencies on more than one occasion. And I think it's the attitude that permeated, and I would hope that it has changed recently. I hope that it has changed, but I wonder if it really has. And I point out something that should not be lost in the translation of what Mr. Blandón has indicated, because for far too long, not only have we heard that cry, but we've also had anyone who comes forward, or the possible majors and colonels within the defense establishment and outside, painted as leftist, painted as communist, painted as very real and more substantial threats to the United States and its interests than Noriega. And nothing could be further from the truth in most cases. They are those people who have leadership capabilities and qualities that Noriega has seen to denigrate. And we have right within the Defense Department, or people on contract to the Defense Department, who seem, even at this time, bent on carrying that kind of message and those distortions. And so it must send a terrible signal to the opposition in Panama when this is coming through continually. But I think it's rather important that we not lose sight of the fact that so many who are capable of leadership and taking it up have been actually painted as people who would pose a greater threat by someone who himself today has actively been promoting the interest of the Cubans, the Soviets, the leftists within, and maybe it has taken these final acts within the last several weeks of a man of desperation to wake us up to the distortions that one Nestor Sanchez seems to have created over a period of time. Nestor Sanchez being an individual who up to rather recently worked directly for the Defense Department and may or may not be on contract at the present time, and who seems to still be in a position to leak out information when the Defense Department meets with a group of majors who come from Panama to attempt to give to the Defense Department information as to how they could use it. I'd like to just be supportive of what I think Mr. Blandón has made in the way of a very comprehensive analysis. And I'd leave with one further thought, Mr. Chairman, as it relates to this. Blandón, do you believe that the Defense Department, the people here, our Defense Department, are speaking to a sufficient breadth, enough Panamanian people to get the correct analysis, or are they still continuing to be wed to their old system? Do they speak to sufficient Panamanian people, in your view, to get a more accurate picture of what the situation is and who could fill the power vacuum within the Panama Defense Forces?
Por las informaciones de la semana pasada, senador.
From the information of last week, Mr. Senator, I think that for the first time, officers of the Department of Defense of the United States had the opportunity to discuss with another group of officers, Panamanian officers, regarding other realities, other facts.
Pero de nuevo,
But once again,
el esquema que se ha planteado a Panamá.
the scheme which has been raised in Panama is a very rigid one, too rigid.
En el no querer reconocer el
In not wishing to recognize the error, they insist on the error, continuing it. And now that you have mentioned
a Néstor Sánchez, yo quisiera expresar
Nestor
algo
Sanchez,
que
I should
nosotros
like
nos
to state
preocupa.
something which concerns us.
El año pasado,
Last year,
Aquilino
Can I, before you do, I want to come back to Nestor Sanchez, but I want to identify him a little more for the purposes of this particular hearing. And before we do that, if I can interrupt you, I would like the record to show that the lawyers for General Noriega, through his lead attorney in Florida, Mr. Neil Sonnet, were asked 2 weeks ago for any evidence that might document what was asserted in the document put forward today by Jose Blandón. Secondly, I join Senator D'Amato in underscoring what Jose Blandón has just said about potential replacements. The intelligence on which our judgments have been based is fundamentally, not exclusively, but fundamentally intelligence which has been fed over the years through General Noriega himself. So he has created really the pages of files on potential replacements. And this is a point which Jose Blandón made last time, but I think in view of the current debate and administration position, it's even more important today to understand that than it was before. Now, Mr. Blandón, would you please re-identify, if you will, who Nestor Sanchez is?
Who is what? ¿Quién?
Nestor Sanchez. Who is he? Identify him, please.
Néstor Sánchez
Nestor Sanchez
trabajó como
worked
primero en la Agencia Central de Inteligencia
first with the CIA for various years,
en el Departamento de
and then in the Defense Department
en el puesto de asistente para América Latina
as an assistant for Latin America of the Defense Department.
Actualmente
At the present time,
forma parte
he is part
de la comisión
of
del Canal de
the
Panamá
Panama Canal Committee, on one of the committees,
y entiendo que es
and I understand
When
that
was
he
he-
is an advisor.
recientemente fue asignado
Recently,
a
he was
la
assigned
comisión del Canal de Panamá.
to the Panama Canal Commission.
Es un hombre que ha estado en
He is a
relación
man who has
continua con
been in
la
continual
Universidad de
relationship with General Noriega for a number of years. His knowledge of the defense forces is limited to those areas.
And you know him to be somebody who has continued to have, even at this moment, input with respect to defense perceptions on the Noriega situation?
Decía que el
I
año
was
pasado,
saying that last year,
el señor Néstor Sánchez sostuvo
Mr.
una
Nestor
reunión
Sanchez
con
had a
Boyd.
meeting with Aquilino Boyd.
Aquilino Boyd es
Aquilino Boyd
un
is
allegado a Noriega.
close to Noriega, who was named by the non-constitutional government of Panama as Ambassador of Panama to the United States. And in those discussions, Aquilino Boyd discussed with Nestor Sanchez
El futuro de las fuerzas de
the
defensa de
future
Panamá
of the defense forces of Panama,
sobre la tesis que
on the
si Noriega
basis
salía,
that if Noriega left,
se desplomaba la pirámide de mando de la fuerza de defensa de Panamá. Y eso iba a
command
colapsar
pyramid would
la fuerza de
fall
defensa de
down in
Panamá.
Panama. Now, the armed
Iba a
forces
poner a
of Panama
Panamá en
was
manos
going to
del
put Panama
Con
then
esa
in the hands of the communists. Now, with this simplistic
operando.
idea, that's what he's been operating on.
Ellos discutieron eso,
They discussed this
porque en esa época
because at that
yo
time
estaba en Nueva York.
I was
y
in New
Aquilino
York,
Boyd discutió
and
eso
Aquilino
conmigo y
Boyd
con el
discussed this with me and with
Ritter de las
Ambassador
Naciones
Ritter
Unidas,
of the
Panamá,
UN,
Naciones
the
Unidas.
Panamanian ambassador to the UN, discussed this problem.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that a meeting took place this past Saturday, a week ago Saturday, on March 25th, where a number of officers in the Panamanian Defense Department met at the Pentagon with the Defense Department officials to discuss the implementation of various opportunities or methods by which Noriega could be exited or moved or removed news of that meeting apparently leaked out and was made available in Panama. And I'd ask Mr. Blandón if that is not correct, if he did not hear that there were meetings that taken place with our Defense Department, with PDF members or PDF officers, and I understand that Mr. Sanchez was seen in the Pentagon lobby at the time of this meeting. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I discussed this with the mayor, and he said that when they were in the Defense Department, he said hello to Nestor Sanchez. This was Saturday, the day that you mentioned, and Sunday. No, this came out on Sunday in the Panamanian papers, that they had met with defense officials in the United States. Who provided the leak, I don't know, but this is what happened.
Is there any additional information you can tell us about the relationship between Nestor Sanchez and General Noriega that you haven't told us?
It is obvious that they have a good friendship, and that he has discussed this thesis of the High Command and the collapse of the leadership of the Defense Forces, and he has put this out as though it were true.
Now, unless Senator D'Amato wants to pursue that, I want to move back into the Medellín Cartel.
Mr. Chairman, I
Señor Presidente,
want to just reemphasize something, and I'm not going to bring it public at this point. But I think unless the Defense Department begins to look into the relationship with Nestor Sanchez and that which he did have with Noriega, and the fact that when this kind of meeting takes place, at this critical juncture, and it's a meeting that I wasn't aware of, Mr. Chairman, but somehow it finds its way, that information finds its way in Panama, that's rather distressing. And the fact of the matter is that maybe they should look a little closer into what the relationship with Nestor Sanchez and Noriega has been and continues to be, and what maybe Noriega has, what information that might be rather embarrassing to Nestor Sanchez that Noriega has, and what influence he still may exercise. And I think it's a rather serious matter. And it disturbs this senator to think that we're still operating on the premise and the basis of information that flows through this individual, and the fact that he just so coincidentally turns up at the time that this meeting has been held, and the fact that this information gets back, that these officers have met with the Defense Department people to Noriega, and I, for one, think that it's a rather disturbing situation. And I think there's a rather myopic point of view that still persists and exists. And for the life of me, I can't understand how this philosophy of just wait for things to take place and things may get better, when indeed we have information, Mr. Chairman, that later I'd like to share with you, that may lead to a situation where upwards of $100+ million may be transferred in the hours and weeks and days ahead in cash money to Noriega. And I wonder how that situation will play out if he's given that infusion of dollars, and how much longer, and what the people of Panama will do. And I'd like to ask one other question, because after all, Jose Blandón is an operative, an intelligence operative with many, many years' experience understanding the psychology of the Panamanian people probably better than anyone we have access to. Mr. Blandón, in your opinion, if the situation persists and Noriega is able to continue in power for the next 3 or 4 weeks, how will the Panamanian people, will there begin to take place a shift in the sentiment of the Panamanian people against the United States as a result of the fact that they have been led to believe that he would be out a long time ago, and they have endured so much in the way of sacrifice, personal, political, economic, etc. Do you think that's a danger?
Usted recordará, senador,
You will recall, Senator,
que en la ocasión que nosotros conversamos en Nueva York,
that when we spoke in New York,
yo le expresé que en el mes de marzo
I
el
told you
gobierno
that
de Noriega
in
iba a entrar
March,
en crisis general.
the Noriega government would enter into a general crisis,
Como efectivamente está.
as indeed is the case.
Pero yo le puedo asegurar que
But
si
I can
Noriega
assure you that if
permanece en el poder
Noriega remains in power
en las próximas 4 semanas,
for the next 4 weeks,
Noriega va a destruir
Noriega
el sistema económico
will
panameño.
destroy the Panamanian economic system.
Y la destrucción del sistema económico
And the
panameño
destruction of the
traerá
Panamanian
como
economic
consecuencia
system will
un
bring
éxodo
in its
masivo
wake
de
a
la poderosa clase media que nosotros hemos construido en el
massive
país.
exit of the powerful middle class that we have
Panamá,
forged in the country.
Ahora mismo hay filas
There are
enormes
long lines in
para
Panama
conseguir
right now
pasaporte
to obtain
y visa
passports
para los
and
Estados
visas
Unidos.
to come to the United States.
La economía panameña
The Panamanian economy
está concebida
is conceived of
para hacer uso de nuestra posición geográfica.
so as to make use of our geographic location.
75% de los ingresos de la República de Panamá
75% of the
vienen de servicios.
income of the Panamanian
Si
government
Noriega logra destruir
of
el
Panama
sistema
comes from
financiero
services. If Noriega is able to destroy the
y
financial system
establece la moneda
and
nacional,
establishes a national currency,
el sistema económico
the
panameño
Panamanian
va a
economic
ser
system
cambiado.
will be changed.
Y más tarde le explicaré
And later,
cómo la inteligencia
I will
cubana
explain how Cuban
ha
intelligence
venido manipulando este problema
has been manipulating this
para llegar a
problem
esa posición.
so as to come to such a
De
juncture.
manera que las 4 próximas semanas
So that the next 4 weeks
son muy claras
are
y decisorias para
very
Panamá.
clearly
Si los
decisive
Estados Unidos
for
deciden
Panama. If the United States decides to wait,
los peligros que los Estados
the
Unidos va
dangers
a
that the
correr en
United
términos
States
de
will
su
run
seguridad
in terms
estratégica
of its strategic security
y el peligro que corre en términos
and the
de
risk
que se voltee la opinión
or the
pública
danger in
contra
terms
los Estados
of
Unidos es
public
muy grande.
opinion being turned against the United States is very great.
Mr. Blandone, I want to try to proceed through a number of other key areas. We have a great deal to cover, a lot of witnesses, and unfortunately not as much time as we would like. In previous testimony, you told us that General Noriega had a relationship with other military intelligence officials throughout the region. Did he have a relationship with the Honduran military intelligence?
Sí, cómo no.
Yes, of course.
Can you describe for us who Colonel Torres Arias is?
El coronel Torres Arias era
Colonel Torres Arias
oficial de la inteligencia hondureña,
was a Honduran intelligence
era jefe del
officer. He was head of the G2, which is the military intelligence of Honduras, and he was changed at the end of 81, beginning of 82.
And what was his relationship with General Noriega?
Torres Arias fue iniciado por
Torres Arias
por Noriega en el tráfico de armas
was initiated to arms trafficking and drug trafficking by Noriega.
y en 2 ocasiones visitó
And
La
on 2
Habana
occasions he visited Havana,
y se reunió allá con Castro
and he met there with Castro
y con miembros del FMLN
and with members of the
para
FMLN
coordinar el envío de armas
to coordinate the shipment of
por
arms
ruta de Honduras.
through Honduras.
At what period of time did General Noriega and Torres Arias enter into a business relationship?
En el mismo momento
At the same
en
time
que el cartel de Medellín
that the Medellín Cartel
usted debe,
was formed,
recordar
you should
cartel de
recall
Medellín
that the Medellín
formó
Cartel was
al
formed
inicio de la década de los 80
at the beginning of the 1980s
como una respuesta
as a
de los
response
señores de la droga
on the part of
en
the
Colombia
drug barons in Colombia
a la amenaza que representaba
to the
el
threat
M-19
represented by the M19
y a la necesidad de tener una estrategia
and the need
coordinada
to have a coordinated strategy
para aumentar sus negocios.
to increase their business.
Desde ese periodo,
From that
se crea el
time,
cartel de Medellín,
when the Medellín Cartel was
una clara
formed,
estrategia,
with a clear strategy,
recursos,
with
no solamente
resources,
financieros,
not only financial
recursos
resources,
humanos,
but also human resources,
hay la tendencia a
because
pensar
there's a tendency to
en el
think
cartel de Medellín
of the Medellín Cartel
como gente asesinas y rudas,
as very crude murderers.
pero detrás de ese cartel
But behind this
todo un
cartel,
equipo técnico,
there's a whole technical team,
economistas,
economists,
financieros
financiers,
gente de inversión
investment
que
experts,
maneja esa fabulosa suma de dinero.
who manage these tremendous quantities of money.
De manera que una organización
Now, let me just interrupt you there quickly. When Milian Rodriguez testified, he sat there and he said to us, "Senators, you don't understand. These people control whole industries. Industries." Is that accurate?
Of course, not only industries. In Panama, they controlled a bank, the Inter-American Bank. This was owned by a member of the cartel, not the Medellín Cartel, but of Cali.
Cali Cartel.
Gilberto Rodríguez Orihuela.
Gilberto Rodríguez Orihuela. He controlled 51% of that bank.
Okay, now let me come back for a second because I want to try to be very precise here. What, to the best of your recollection, and if you don't remember, tell us you don't remember, but approximately what year did this relationship with Colonel Arias begin, with General Noriega?
En 1980.
In 1980.
Now, the nature of the business you have described as being narcotics and arms, is that the totality of it?
Comenzó con el negocio de armas primero.
It began with arms business first, arms trafficking.
When did it move into narcotics?
En el 81.
In 1981.
Were there other Honduran military officers or officials involved?
Después de Torre Arias, ¿te dicen?
After Torres Arias, you mean?
Yes. Well, even at the same time, was Torres Arias alone in his effort, or was he joined by others?
No, Torres Arias trabajaba con el coronel Boden.
No, he worked with Colonel Boden,
que controlaba una de las unidades
who controlled one of the most powerful units of Honduras.
Era el tipo de relación que usted ve ahora
It was the
mismo
type of relationship that you see now in Haiti.
Igual que comenzó con Noriega.
Just as that, which also began with Noriega, and the boss is very important. Or the pattern, rather, the pattern.
El cartel selecciona al oficial
the cartel
de más alto rango que
chooses the highest level official working or officer working in the agency. So Noriega was G2.
Torres Arias
was G2.
Boden controlaba uno de los
Boden controlled one of the most powerful units of Honduras.
En Haití,
in Haiti,
el coronel involucrado,
the colonel who's involved,
el más poderoso,
is the most powerful officer.
Y el cartel que tiene mejor información de inteligencia
and the
de los
cartel,
oficiales que
which
tiene
has
la agencia norteamericana,
better intelligence information about the officers than the U.S. intelligence
tiene un mejor
agencies,
sistema de reclutamiento.
has a better system of recruitment.
Y desde ese momento,
and from that moment,
expande el cuartel de Medellín en
it is from that moment in 80 and 81 that the Medellín Cartel expanded.
Y a partir del año de 1983, cuando
and beginning in 1983, when its true expansion began.
Before you go to the expansion, what was Colonel Boden's unit? Which unit?
El batallón blindado, no recuerdo el nombre.
The armed vehicle battalion, I don't remember the name, that's based in Tegucigalpa.
And is he still an active duty officer in Honduras?
No, ellos no son activos. Ellos fueron retirados.
No, they are not active. They were retired when General Alvarez came to power in 1982.
Was there any specific reason stated for their retirement at the time?
Porque la agencia de inteligencia
because the Honduran intelligence agency and U.S. intelligence agencies
percibieron esta información de las reuniones de Castro.
This information about the meetings with Castro, with Torres Arias, and you'll recall that I informed in the last hearings that when we received the information that the information had filtered into Honduras about Torres Arias and Boden's travel to Cuba, Noriega passed this information on to the U.S. intelligence agencies.
Did they ship weapons to the rebels in El Salvador?
¿Cómo no?
Of course.
Say of course.
Por supuesto.
Do you know that, or do you say of course because everybody did it?
No, porque todo el mundo lo sabía, no. Porque Noriega coordinó
because Noriega coordinated meetings in Panama
con la dirección del Frente Farabundo Martí
with the directorate of the Farabundo Martí Front
para el establecimiento de dos rutas de suministro de
to
armas
establish 2 routes for arms supply to El Salvador.
Una por abajo en el Golfo de Fonseca.
One through beneath through the Gulf of Fonseca, and another in the north of Honduras, which was called the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Eso fue discutido por Torres Arias y Boden.
This was discussed by Torres Arias in meetings in Panama.
Do you attend any of those meetings?
A las dos reuniones yo atendí.
I attended both meetings.
Can you describe to us who is Mata Ballesteros?
Mata Ballesteros is a drug trafficker who is originally Colombian, who is currently in Honduras.
Did Mata Ballesteros have a relationship with Noriega?
No que yo sepa.
Not that I know of.
What was his role in Honduran drug trafficking? Can you bring the mic down a little bit? Good, thank you.
Mata Ballesteros es un hombre
Mata
multimillonario.
Ballesteros is a multi-billionaire.
Diferentes estimaciones indican que su
Different
fortuna es de más de
estimates
$1.000 millones.
indicate that his fortune is greater than $1 billion.
Usted se puede imaginar el nivel de influencia
You can imagine the
que tiene en
degree
Honduras.
of influence that he has in Honduras.
Is he the same Mata Ballesteros who was wanted by, for the prosecution in the murder of the DEA drug agent Camarena?
Es el mismo.
Yes, it's the same one.
So this wanted accused murderer, alleged murderer, who is one of the richest men in Honduras, is currently under indictment for murder of a DEA agent, is currently sitting in Honduras at the moment with impunity. Is that correct?
Es correcto.
Yes, it is correct.
And do you know how long he has been there?
No, no sé.
No, I don't know.
Who in the Honduran military picked up the drug business after Torres Arias, if you know?
Usted dice cuando salió Torres Arias del...
You mean when Torres Arias left the armed forces?
Yes.
El problema, senador, es que
The problem, Senator,
con toda la operación que se estaba
is
realizando
that
entre los años
with all of
83 y
the
84 en
operation being
Honduras,
carried out in 83 and 84 in Honduras,
de soporte militar a
military
contra
support
Nicaragua,
against
se
Nicaragua,
crearon condiciones naturales
created natural conditions
para actividades ilícitas.
for illicit activities.
Now, are you talking about the supply effort to the Contras in 83, 84?
Exactamente.
Exactly.
Well, apart from the natural opportunities that it afforded, do you personally have knowledge of Honduran involvement subsequent to Torres Arias in drug trafficking?
Después en Panamá había evidencias de eso,
In Panama, there were indications of
pero
that,
no evidencias que me permitan
but
señalar
not indications that,
involucramiento
or
directo.
evidence that would allow me to indicate direct involvement.
Let me ask you this question. Was there an involvement, to your knowledge, in drug trafficking by the Honduran Navy?
No. ¿De la
No.
Armada se refiere
You
al
refer to the
ejército o
Navy or the Army?
The Navy.
al Navy? No, no tengo conocimiento de eso.
No, I do not have knowledge of that.
Do you know who Hector Aplicano is?
Sí.
Yes.
Could you describe to us who he is?
Es un coronel de la Fuerza Armada hondureña.
He is a
que fue
colonel of the
dado de baja en
Honduran Armed Forces who
1986.
was discharged in 1986.
Do you know whether or not he was involved with drug smuggling while he oversaw the Contra supply efforts in Honduras?
No tengo información de que
I
estuviera
do not have
involucrado en el
information that he
narcotráfico.
was
Sé que él era
involved in drug trafficking. I do know that he was the link between
entre la Contra y el ejército
the
hondureño.
Contras and the Honduran Army.
Do you know a Honduran officer named Captain Luque? Have I pronounced that correctly?
Es correcto. Luque era el operativo
That's
del
right.
africano que estaba
Luque
encargado también del
was
mismo
the
trabajo.
operative who was involved in the same work.
Well, what do you mean, involved in the same work?
Trabajaba con Aplicano en el suministro.
He worked with
y apoyo a la
Aplicano
contra.
in supplying the Contras.
And he worked at the airstrips that were used for resupply, is that correct?
Correcto.
Yes, it is correct.
Now, at some time, did Cesar Rodriguez tell you that drugs were going through those strips?
César Rodríguez.
Cesar Rodriguez?
César Rodríguez utilizaba las pistas de Costa
Cesar
Rica
Rodriguez used the airstrip in Costa Rica,
esencialmente.
basically.
But you told us sometime previously that Cesar Rodriguez told you that those airstrips in Honduras were being used also for the transshipment. Is that correct?
Correcto. Lo que he dicho que
Yes,
principalmente
what I
César
said was
Rodríguez
that Cesar
utilizaba cuando
Rodriguez
salía de
mainly
Panamá
used when he left
las pistas
Panama
de Costa Rica.
the
También hacía
airstrips in
escalas en
Costa Rica.
Honduras.
He also made stops in
Pero
Honduras,
principalmente operaba
but
desde
mainly
Costa
he
Rica.
operated from Costa Rica.
Do you know whether or not trafficking through Honduras has continued up until the present time?
No tengo información.
I do not have information in this regard.
And can you tell us the circumstances of the visit of Torres Arias and Budin to Cuba?
La visita de Torres Arias y Bodin en Cuba, que fue en
Torres
dos
Arias
ocasiones,
and Boden's travel to Cuba, which
se
was
dio
on
en
two
ocasión
occasions,
de la necesidad de
occurred by virtue of the
suministrar
need to resupply
armamento más específico
more specific
al
arms
movimiento del FMLN
to the FMLN movement
y para establecer una relación con
and to
personal con
establish
Castro
a relationship with Castro's personnel
de manera de avalarlos con los guerrilleros en El Salvador.
so that they would be trusted with vis-a-vis the guerrillas in El Salvador.
What was General Noriega's role in that?
Ellos salieron con destino a Panamá
They went to Panama,
y teóricamente estaban en Panamá.
and theoretically they were in Panama.
Y en un avión de la Fuerza Armada Panameña fueron a La Habana.
And an armed forces plane of the Panamanian Armed Forces took them to Havana.
And that's the totality of his role?
En términos del arreglo de su visita, sí.
In terms of arranging the visits, yes.
But General Noriega had a business relationship with them with respect to the results of that visit. Is that correct?
Ah, claro.
Of course.
Después,
Yes.
a través de la red de suministro de armas
Later,
que tenía
after the
Noriega,
arms resupply network that Noriega had,
en la que conseguían armas
in which they
en
obtained
diferentes
arms
países,
in different countries,
con la red de César Rodríguez
with
y la
the
red de
network
Harari,
of Cesar Rodriguez and the red of
continuaron el
Aria,
suministro de armas.
they continued the arms supply.
Now, Mr. Blandone, you told me also on a number of occasions in my office as we discussed this that the clandestine network of airstrips which were used for the Contra supply, that is to say both in Costa Rica as well as in Honduras, were also used extensively by drug traffickers. Is that accurate? Same airstrips?
Repítame la pregunta, por favor.
Please repeat the question.
You said to me on a couple of occasions in my office as we discussed this that the airstrips, the clandestine network, the secret network of airstrips which were used for Contra supply were also used extensively for drug trafficking.
Hay una información que quisiera
There is some
plantearle al
information
senador
that I would like to set forth, Senator,
por la existencia
because of
de
the
una nueva evidencia más contundente
insistence of a more convincing evidence,
que liga a la
stronger
red de
evidence
los
that
Harari
links the Arare network
con respecto a todo esto,
with respect to all of this.
por razones de que ese
Okay, now,
testigo,
when you say, you're going to lose some people here, when you say the Horare, you're talking about Mike Horare, is that correct?
si me refiero al ciudadano
Sí,
israelita,
Yes, I'm referring to the Israeli citizen
que tiene negocios con Noriega en
who
Panamá,
has business with
que formó una serie de
Noriega in
compañías
Panama,
para el
who formed a
contrabando de
series
armas,
of companies for arms contraband,
para
arms smuggling,
suministrar armas
to supply arms
a Centroamérica y a la
to Central
contrarrevolución,
America and to the counter-revolution, the Nicaraguan counter-revolution.
y que además esos mismos aviones se usaban para otras cosas.
And moreover, those planes were used for other
Dado el
things.
hecho de que
When you say other things, what do you mean?
droga,
Drugs.
And when you say the Harare Network, what is the Harare Network?
la red de Harari es
The
una
Harare
red que
Network
se estableció con
is a network
ciudadanos
that was
israelíes,
established with Israeli
panameños,
citizens,
norteamericanos, para el
Panamanians,
suministro de
and
armas.
U.S. citizens for arms supply purposes.
When was this formed?
En 1982-83,
In 1982 and
trabajó hasta
83,
1986,
it functioned until 1986
Where did it function from?
desde Panamá.
from Panama.
What countries was it involved with?
Quisiera pedirle a
I
señor
would like
presidente que
to ask Mr. Chairman
este tema se ha
that
discutido
this topic has been
de forma
discussed,
cerrada porque
that this be discussed in a
testigo
closed way because there's a
está
witness
pendiente de una serie de trámites
who is still
que
pending a series of
conversaron con nosotros
measures.
y ayer.
I spoke with him yesterday,
Preferiría que esto
and I would prefer
sea manejado
that this
en una
be
sesión cerrada primero.
dealt with in a closed session first.
Mr. Blandone, we will agree to do that. We will do that in a closed session, and I understand why. And I think it is important, but I want to do it immediately in closed session, not this moment, this instant, but within the next few days. Is that agreeable?
Sí.
Yes.
Before we move off this subject, I want to ascertain for the public record, without any question, that this involves, that there is a direct linkage that you're aware of the private network, that the Harare network and these airstrips in which guns would go in one shipment and drugs would come out in another. Is that accurate?
Correcto.
Yes.
And on some occasions, drugs just went in and out on their own. That's also accurate, is it not?
Correcto.
Yes.
We will pursue the names and the particular individual that I'm aware of and staff is aware of, and we've already been in touch with him, as a matter of fact, so we will pursue that in closed session and move into another area. When General Noriega took over the government from President de Valle, actually formalized his takeover in a public way, at that time, at the beginning of the month, the Japanese government decided to approve the new government installed by Noriega. At that point, we began our economic sanctions. Has there been a relationship between General Noriega and Japan that we should be aware of?
Bueno, históricamente,
Well, historically,
la República de Panamá
the Republic of
mantiene excelentes
Panama
relaciones con
maintains
el gobierno de
excellent
Japón.
relations with the government of Japan.
Desde la época
From the time
del general Torrijos
of General Torrijos,
y el general Noriega, obviamente,
and General
heredó
Noriega obviously
esa buena relación.
inherited those good relations.
Los intereses de Japón en Panamá son muy
Japan's
importantes
interests in Panama are very
en el presente
significant
y lo van a hacer en el
at
futuro.
present, and they will be so in the future.
Por razón de ser Japón
because
importador
Japan
de
is a
mercancías
net exporter of commodities,
y nosotros ser una ruta transoceánica de
our
importancia para
status
Japón.
as
De manera que
a
los intereses de
transoceanic
Japón en
route that is
Panamá
important
son muy
for
importantes
Japan.
y nosotros los
So
panameños
the relations are very important,
estamos interesados
and
en
we,
cultivar
for
esa
Japan,
relación.
and we Panamanians are interested in cultivating that relationship.
Now, I've been asked by, just take 1 minute here. I think we will take a 10-minute recess at this time, reconvene at 20 minutes of. We stand in recess for 10 minutes. These hearings of the Subcommittee on Narcotics, Terrorism, and International Operations of the Foreign Relations Committee will come to order. I was informed that Senator D'Amato is on his way from the airport. He was coming down and is slightly delayed. I was trying to allow him time to be able to be here for the beginning. Let me just make a couple of brief comments by way of introduction to this week and where we are going and where we have been. 6 weeks ago, this subcommittee held the first set of hearings on international drug trafficking, and at the beginning of those hearings, I indicated the literally frightening degree to which I believed that narco trafficking and the narco dollar has permeated the everyday affairs of countries that we deal with. I also stressed at that time that, in my opinion, this was a threat that was defining itself as really more serious than many of those with which we have been preoccupied in the daily dialogue of this country these past few years. In some ways, some people may feel that we've learned and heard too much about drugs lately. But drugs are literally tearing at the fabric of American life. They are killing adult and children. Back with us, and I am delighted to welcome you back, Mr. Blandon. We are going to, for those who were not here previously, let me explain that we have simultaneous translation that has been provided us by the State Department, and we will proceed so that for those of you who are in the audience who wish to share the translation as we go along, there are headsets available to everybody, and one channel will be English to Spanish, the other is Spanish to English, simultaneous, and we will proceed through that means, although Mr. Blandon, you and I have conversed on many occasions in English. If you feel you would like to do so at this time, we obviously invite you to do so at any time. I would ask you if you would stand, please, so that I could re-swear you. Would you raise your right hand, please? And do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Blandon. Would you please state your full name again and identify yourself for the record?
Mi nombre es José Blandón
My name is
Castillo.
José Blandón Castillo.
The chairman is trying to get the correct channel here. Which one am I in? All right. Mr. Blandon,
Señor Blandón,
you are the same Jose Blandon who testified here before this committee about 6 weeks ago. Trialed, they're undermining our institutions, they're filling our jails, they're depleting our national energy and our creativity, and they are costing us billions of dollars in various social costs. In recent weeks, we've come to understand even more as we've watched events unfold in Panama about the scope of the criminal enterprise. We've seen how it threatens whole countries and how it upsets the stability of an already very fragile hemisphere. These hearings continue today in an effort to further shed light on this scourge, to better understand its scope and its nature, so that we can better determine what we're going to do about it, if in fact we're really going to respond to it. So we begin today an examination that picks up where we left off. We will look at additional countries. We will also revisit Panama briefly with Jose Blandón in order to literally pick up where we left off and to review where the situation is today, as well as to touch on some matters which we were not able, because of time constraints, to go into during the last session. It seems to me that through all of the exercise of the last week and of the events of the last few weeks, it's clear that one thing leaps out at all of us, and it's a tragic recognition, and that is that despite all the rhetoric, despite a good beginning at education in this country, despite a congressional law passed last year, despite all of the talk about a war on drugs, there has not been a real war, and more pointedly, drugs have not been the priority that public officials have said they were. That will become even more clear as we examine not only what has happened in other countries, but as we examine how we ourselves have made decisions that have put us where we are. And I think that will be one of the most interesting parts of these hearings. We have a great many witnesses that we will hear from. We will hear from Jose Blandón. We will hear from former ambassador to Costa Rica, Francis McNeil. We will hear from a number of people who have been incarcerated, or some who are not incarcerated, who have themselves been involved in both the narcotics trafficking as well as some of the other efforts which have resulted in the problems that I've talked about. Senator Bob Graham of Florida has a specific interest in Haiti and has asked that I postpone certain portions of Haiti until he returns from a trip to Moscow. I have agreed to do that, and we will touch on Haiti in the course of this week, but we will complete Haiti upon his return. In addition, Senator Mitch McConnell, who is the ranking member of this committee, has business in his state and is unable to be here for a good portion of it. Therefore, we have agreed to postpone a part of the reappearance of Ramon Milian Rodriguez and others until Monday of next week. But Mr. Rodriguez will nevertheless appear this week as to certain matters that are of importance to the general inquiry. Finally, Jose Blandón is...
Correcto.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Blandón, at that time you told us a considerable amount about the specifics of General Noriega's involvement in narcotics trafficking. We did not, however, discuss a great deal about the money laundering process itself, nor did we discuss some of the involvements with other countries, although we did touch on aspects of General Noriega's involvement in gun running and his links to Cuba. Today we would like to explore a number of new areas which you personally did not go into, but specifically I want to pursue them because they are important in terms of corroborating the testimony of other witnesses. Let me just interrupt my own questions here to welcome Senator D'Amato. Senator D'Amato, as I explained to you, Senator McConnell is the ranking member who is not here. Senator D'Amato is the ranking member of the Senate Drug Caucus. He has had a long participation in the investigation with respect to Panama and a long interest in this area, and I'm delighted at his help. He has been extremely helpful, both his staff and he himself, to our investigative efforts, and I'm delighted to welcome him here again for this week. Senator D'Amato, do you want to open? Let me just move over and let Senator D'Amato move over.
Mr. Chairman, let me say that when 2 months ago you first held